So what can we do about it? I suggest, first of all, that what we should not do is attempt to return to the imagined ideal of a Christian continent because of our fear of an Islamic takeover. Talk of our Christian heritage is nonsense. Our heritage is the heritage of the Enlightenment. It was the Enlightenment that led our escape from the tyranny and bondage of medieval Christianity. What we need, and the only system that will enable all Europeans together to live in peace and harmony, is secularism, by which I mean complete state neutrality in matters of religion and belief. In practical terms, we could make a start by adopting a policy of zero tolerance towards incitement to hatred and towards preachers of hate. This is crucially important because incitement to hatred has been shown to play on our human capacity to hate injustice and to turn that hatred into violent reaction. The genocides of the Holocaust and Rwanda happened because ordinary people were inspired by their leaders to hate those who were perceived as acting unjustly towards them. We should therefore have no hesitation in acting severely against anyone who incites hatred of any group. And this applies whether the group in question is Jews, Muslims, immigrants, atheists, homosexuals, Christians, or any other. In fact, all our governments in Europe are obliged under Article 20 of the ICCPR to act in this way. Unfortunately, few of them do so consistently. Islamist imams, for example, seem to have a free pass to preach hatred of the West and of Western values in many of Europe's mosques. No religion should be permitted to preach hate simply because such hatred appears in their holy texts. Religious belief cannot and must not be allowed to trump human rights or the law of the land. We also need to make clear the distinction between, on the one hand, incitement to hatred, and on the other, criticism of religion, no matter how crude and vulgar that criticism may be. Incitement should be outlawed, but criticism permitted as part of our precious commitment to freedom of expression. We must make absolutely clear the distinction between the believer and the belief. Believers should have all their human rights protected, but beliefs are fair game, and there is no human right not to be offended. Now, harsh though it may seem on the poor and the dispossessed, if we are to avoid major conflicts in the future, I believe we do need to limit immigration to the numbers that can be absorbed and assimilated into our societies. We must do far more to help members of the immigrant communities learn the skills they'll need to prosper here. But we must also recognize that the numbers we can absorb depends on their costs to society in terms of education, healthcare, social services, and, it must be said, in terms of security. We should support Muslim dissidents, apostates and heretics. Groups like the Islamic Reform Movement and the councils of ex-Muslims, which now exist in many European states. Last weekend, I attended a conference in Oxford called Critical Thinking for Islamic Reform. There were about 60 people there, almost all of them believing Muslims, but all of them totally opposed to the hardliners, totally opposed to Sharia law, to the Muslim Brotherhood and the OIC. We hardly ever hear about these Muslims. I left that conference hugely encouraged. But unless these reformers can become the dominant voice of Islam in Europe, we're heading for serious trouble. So we must do all we can to help these dissidents. We should not accept self-censorship. Every time an editor, out of fear, spikes an article or a cartoon that is mocking or critical of Islam or any other religion, we should publicize that fact, and that it was done out of fear and not respect. Regarding religion in general, I would suggest that we could make a start by opposing all attempts by organised religion to obtain special concessions from government, whether it be funds for religious events, support for faith schools, tax breaks for supposedly charitable activities, or attempts to allow religious courts to adjudicate in matters of family law. We should campaign for the complete separation of religion and state everywhere, for the disestablishment of state churches, and for the abrogation of all concordats with the Vatican. Every state that has not done so should adopt a constitutional requirement of secularism, that is, complete neutrality in matters of religion or belief, as a first step towards complete separation. We should campaign to have public funding for faith schools and other forms of religious indoctrination withdrawn, and for faith schools to meet the same educational standards as other schools, and to bring all faith schools under state supervision. We should provide for the teaching of critical thinking. I was pleased that when our two youngest children took the International Baccalaureate, one of the compulsory subjects was the theory of knowledge, that is, a combination of philosophy and critical thinking. We should promote the teaching of ethics as rooted in an understanding of our shared humanity. All children should be taught comparative religion, including atheism and humanism, as an antidote to indoctrination, which today is running unchecked through many schools in Europe. The teaching of ethics should be centered on the humanist ideal, shared by many religions, that we are entitled to be treated with dignity, to be allowed personal autonomy, and to have equal treatment before the law, and that we should treat others as we would wish to be treated. We need to promote the teaching of science for the non-scientist, an appreciation of the scientific method, of the discoveries of science, and how we know what we think we know. Respect for the scientific, evidence-based approach to life, politics, society, and the world around us will go a long way towards the elimination of superstition and undue religious influence in public life. We must teach the history of European civilization, of the struggle for freedom, and above all, for freedom of the mind. We must explain the Enlightenment values on which modern European human civilization is based, and teach our children about the struggles of the early scientists and social reformers against the power and vested interests of the Church. These then were just a few suggestions as to how we might tackle the problem of religious influence in politics and society. We will no doubt hear many more good ideas during the course of this weekend. And as a final thought, what I might like to suggest, if the organisers agree, is that we prepare a list of these recommendations as the conference proceeds, and then publish them as a summary at the end of the conference. Perhaps we might call it the Copenhagen Declaration on Religion and Politics. Thank you.